There are very specific things that people shouldn't be eating. Whey protein, for example, for A blood types. 39% of the human population are A's. So if you lived like we should, there would only be a little tiny bit of genetic hair loss.
Sounds easier said than done.
It's impossible. It is impossible. You can see a physical change in how a hair is growing when somebody goes outside. If we can get those nutritional levels up, it's going to be fuel for hair regrowth, and it will be a monumental change.
Hey everybody, welcome back. Today we have our friend Will, who's a trichologist with us. He's going to help us, maybe a couple of bald guys regrow some hair on top, huh?
I want a head of hair like that.
It would be nice.
Yeah,
That's
I'll take the gray. I don't give a shit. That's my full head.
Hey, the gray looks nice. As men, we age well, so it's okay.
It's about doing it gracefully.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, welcome to the show. Thanks
Hey.
for coming, man.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you coming out. Want to kind of explain what led you down this road to be a trichologist?
Let's start with, what is a trichologist?
Yeah.
It's a great question.
Yeah.
So a trichologist is a scientist of the hair and scalp.
Okay.
And in the US, it's a certificate. Oftentimes it's some random certificate that really doesn't mean a whole lot. But when you are in Europe or Australia or even South America, you can get a full degree. You can become a doctor of trichology. And it's more of an advanced science in other countries. But again, scientist of the hair and scalp.
Yes. When you say that in other countries, does America lead the world in hair loss?
That is a great question. I would say that it's entirely possible because what we do to ourselves as Americans, stress, the pressure, prescription drugs, the healthcare anomalies, those all add up to more hair loss and inflammation, the lack of appropriate nutrition, fad diets. These all just expedite genetics. They expedite other conditions like telogen effluvium or alopecia areata. So I don't know if that's true,
Yeah.
but I'd say that it could be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then-
Hair loss affects everybody though.
Yeah, and like we were talking off camera, the hair loss doesn't necessarily start with the head. Could be your nutrition, could be several other factors that most people don't realize.
Most of hair loss is actually the exacerbating factors. It's my opinion that if we lived like we're sort of intending to, I mean, genetically and how we evolved over, whatever, 100,000 years, whatever you ultimately what you believe in, but we're wired to be in nature. We're wired to be living a truly organic diet. We're wired to be in a community. And when we are wandering around consuming chemicals, being exposed to a million different things all the time, it is just going to aggravate the system and expedite loss. So if you lived like we should, there would only be a little tiny bit of genetic hair loss, in my opinion.
Sounds easier said than done.
It's impossible. It is impossible. So so many people say, like, what do I need to eat? And it's like, well, it's not just what you need to eat now. It's for all the damage that's been done since, when you were born, you weren't breastfed. So now all of a sudden you don't have the proper microbiome in your gut to basically keep inflammation down, or the antibiotics you were put on as a kid. And those then expedite inflammation. So there's endless amounts of reasons for hair loss.
I'm sure that the guys that do the transplants and these aren't very fond of your methods.
The physicians mainly do hair transplantation.
Yeah.
And that's their business.
Yeah.
So for them to grow hair back would kind of be shooting themselves in the foot. Not to say that all physicians are not pro, restoration of your own hair naturally. There's a lot of people trying. I just don't know if they have the time.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you spend 5 minutes as a dermatologist with 35 patients in a day, how are you going to find out what they're eating?
Yeah.
Right? How are you going to find out, all of the medications or the patient history that makes a big difference on what's happening to them today? And I mean, even our medical director, I mean, she has her own practice as a dermatologist, and she sees 30 to 35 patients a day. So maximum time limit is usually 10 minutes. That's max. It's usually 5.
You're not getting out that much information in 10 minutes.
You can't. I mean, I had 3 consults yesterday. All of them went over. So, and my consults were normally an hour. Each one was an hour and a half yesterday. And that's just because that's what we needed to go through. And they have a million questions.
And that's if somebody's being completely open and honest with what, or if they even know what they are doing on a day-to-day basis. I feel like some of us are kind of zoned out and can't even be conscious of, oh yeah, well, I did eat such and such yesterday or 2 weeks ago or this, or be conscious of like what they're really putting their body through, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and it's funny because under the microscope, and this is other things physicians typically don't do, they're not looking at people's scalp under the microscope, and you can see a physical change in how a hair is growing when somebody goes outside. Let's just say they're vitamin D3 deficient, for example. They go outside for the weekend, they're hitting the beach, they're going down to San Diego, and then on Monday morning, their hair, microscopically, the last millimeter of hair that grew is actually thicker and darker because it's responding to the vitamin D that they got from the sun.
So some people would think that maybe we've learned to fear the sun in a lot of regards growing up.
Yeah.
People treat it like it's something, bad for us, skin cancer, these things. But I've seen recently that people are coming back around to the fact that the sun is our friend, which would make total sense, no? I mean,
Yeah, absolutely.
So then going back to the sun thing, let's say you spend a couple hours a day in the sun, but if you're wearing a baseball cap, how's your head going to get any of that?
Or if you're wearing sunscreen, you're blocking the absorption of the UVB rays, which are going to convert to vitamin D3 in your skin. And you're in the sun, but you're not absorbing it.
Yeah.
What about wearing sunglasses in the sun? Does that close? Like, I'm reading mixed on that one.
So I can't speak to the science on that. I've been told by some people who are vested in, how you absorb vitamin D3 through your eyes, that it is absolutely an issue and you shouldn't wear sunglasses. And then other people that are like, it doesn't matter. So I don't know. That's not my
But
area.
sunblock hat, you're saying that'll block.
I
Absolutely.
did see some studies recently where people were saying that they see an instance in facial skin cancer, more cases based off of people that wear sunglasses while they drive and things of that nature, huh?
Well, and low vitamin D3 increases the probability of cancer. So
In
in
not
general,
just skin cancer.
yeah, I mean, you look at COVID, basically a couple of things they were recommending. So vitamin D3 and zinc, those are things that are going to help boost your immune system. So if your vitamin D3 is, say, 8 nanograms per milliliter, and you really want it in the middle of the range, which would be between 60 and 80 nanograms per milliliter, which is great for your hair. But even more importantly, it allows your immune system to function properly. So it's going to attack whatever's attacking you. So whether it be, bugs in your system or cancer.
So these pills like skin, hair, and nails and these type of things, what's in those? What is it, biotin, or is it?
A lot of times it's shenanigans.
Yeah.
It's so
The girls take them a lot. I see that,
well, and most of the time people will show up in my office and they're like, you know what? I started on 10,000 micrograms of biotin per day. I can't believe it. I'm still losing hair. And I'm like, yeah, because biotin isn't going to grow your hair if you don't have a biotin deficiency. And only 2% of the world's population actually has a biotin deficiency, and most of them aren't in the United States.
So there's no point in taking biotin, essentially.
I mean, if you happen to be one of those random people, vegetarians, vegans, that will probably need it more because you get a ton of B vitamins from eating meats, particularly red meat. And if you are deficient in any of the Bs, a little bit of biotin is going to be helpful. But again, most people have plenty of it and it's not an issue.
So to the protein side, you are a fan of red meat versus going after certain proteins based on blood type.
Absolutely. So I had a presentation. This presentation was to, a room full of physicians. And whenever I bring up blood type, I can feel everyone's eyes rolling in the back of their head because they're like, oh, there's no credibility to that. However, they're seeing that now there's links to different diseases based on your blood type. So to me, I'm like, if there's links to different diseases based on your blood type, wouldn't that make sense that perhaps different blood types require different nutrient levels, or perhaps because of their genetic makeup, then they have little idiosyncrasies in their immune state that may be something to look at. So that's where, yes, I'm a huge fan of Eat Right for the blood type, mainly because I had a test group in 2009. So I had 3 clinics in Phoenix, Arizona at the time, all of the freak shows that didn't grow hair in my primary program, which we did everything. So finasteride, compounded topical minoxidil, scalp massages, laser, all the supplements, shampoos, etc. And if they didn't grow hair, like how could they not grow hair? So they ended up in my office, and my office is basically designed to figure out what's wrong with each individual. And at the time I was tracking different blood types. I'm not sure why. We started to look at ferritin levels, vitamin D3 levels, et cetera, some gut health. And I found that the test group, because I recommended being vegetarian at the time, because I didn't know any better, because that was healthy for your liver and your kidneys, then most of that test group were O blood types. O blood types are natural carnivores. So they were following my diet recommendations because they had spent $4,000 or $5,000 to be in my program. And they were going, hey, I cut all this red meat out and I'm losing hair on your program. What's going on? So anyway, for whatever reason, I ended up with that book, in my presence, and I'm looking through and they're going, oh, these O blood types, they're supposed to eat meat. What's that about? And then I'm looking at these A blood types, which 39% of the human population are A's, 41 is O's. And I'm looking at the bulk of this human population, and they're totally polar opposite. So one's supposed to be a vegetarian, the other one's supposed to be a carnivore. And I'm looking at who's responding and who's not responding. So the A's were responding, the O's in this case were not. So I switched up their diets.
Is that so? Once again, just to reiterate that, so A blood type does better on a vegetarian diet,
Yes.
and an O blood type does better on a carnivorous diet.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, I didn't know that.
And again, I mean, this book has been around, Dr. Diadamo, I always say it differently. Dr. Diadamo, he did all of these sort of research projects on how different foods interact with your blood. And, I didn't give it any credence for the first 8 years of my career, but I find that there are very specific things that people shouldn't be eating. Whey protein, for example, for A blood types. B blood types shouldn't be eating chicken. So I have a lot of these people who are from India, or they're from Southeast Asia. They're coming in from the tech industry, especially in Phoenix.
And they don't eat red meat.
They don't
Indians.
typically, they don't eat red meat, so they eat chicken.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there have been at least 5 times that the only thing that I changed, if we treated them for an extended period of time, we used minoxidil, finasteride. They're young men. They should be responding really, really easily, and they're not. And the only thing I changed was eliminating chicken from their diet, which sounds ludicrous. If I was watching this, I'd be like, Will, you're insane. This doesn't make any sense. But I witnessed it, and they ended up removing chicken from their diet, switching to turkey, something so basic. All of a sudden, they started responding.
For B blood types.
B blood types, that's right.
B positive, B negative.
That's correct.
Okay. How many blood types are there? Just so.
4.
Okay. There's
And
O, A, B.
Yep. And so B is about
AB.
18. AB is about 2% of the human population.
That's the most rare.
That is the most rare. And to be very honest, I don't have specific idiosyncrasies about the AB because I just
So rare.
have such limited exposure. And when somebody says they're an AB, I'm like, ugh, that's unfortunate.
You're like,
Yeah. Do we know why or how the blood types work, or why somebody is a certain type of blood type or not? Is it hereditary, or is it?
Yeah, so it's an evolutionary process. So if you subscribe to the process that we all started in Africa and then we basically spread out,
Yeah.
the universal donor is an O blood type.
Oh.
Yeah. So why is that? So that's the original blood type. So everybody can get O blood, but an AB can only give to another AB. And it's just because essentially these O blood types spread out through, the continents and ended up then literally through an evolutionary process spinning off and adapting to their environment and creating the new blood type. I mean, not to say that we're going to all of a sudden have a fifth blood type, but most A's are typically from Southern Europe. So you're going to see Italians, you're going to see Greeks, Croatians. Like these people typically are A blood types. You go back, well, what is a typical Greek or Italian diet? Well, it's made up of a lot of pasta. It's made up of a lot of vegetables, olives. You think of like a Greek salad, and you think of what is a typical diet for, say, a Northern European, which are predominantly O's. And Northern Europeans are going to be eating a ton of meat, maybe some potatoes and some vegetables. They also do really well on fermented foods. So you go to Finland or Norway, and all of a sudden, they bury fish in the ground, through the winter or whatever it is, and they're fermenting it. Well, that's great for their gut. Sauerkraut, in Germany. So you look back at all these traditional foods and you go, well, these people sustained existence for an untold amount of time, basically eating these foods, but some ate completely different than the others. And for an example, I'm an O, my wife's an A. When I met her, she's eating all this pasta. She's like, oh, I might want to, lose a pound or two. I'm like, oh, you must eat protein. This is what you should do. And she's like, oh, okay, I'm going to try it. And she did it, and she actually gained weight. And it's like, when then she went back to eating pasta and vegetables, she lost weight. Well, how does that work? But that's the difference, is that everybody's an individual, and they respond to different things differently.
I can't remember my blood type right now, but I got to go back and figure it out.
Well, if you're helmet A positive,
and if you said you're Italian, or you have at least some Italian.
Yeah, I'm Italian.
Okay.
I have I'm Italian, Irish. I have a good mix of European stuff in me, so
probably an A or a B.
Double check.
Sorry, an A or an O.
An A or an O, probably. Yeah. I want to say I might be a B for some reason.
Oh,
it's ringing a bell. Maybe B or something.
Okay.
Is that more of a rare blood type?
I mean, again, I think it's about 18% of the human population.
So rare in the sense of one to one. Yeah, but
and if you are, then you can eat cheese like it's going out of style.
Really?
And if you like cheese,
I love cheese.
I love cheese too.
Yeah.
No, I shouldn't.
So cheese doesn't affect a B blood type. I shouldn't be chicken.
Correct. So you can
a K Rico for you.
But I love, you know what? And I'm not really into chicken that much either. It's not the thing. So I was a little background. I did vegan for like 8 months, about 8 years ago, and then I felt amazing. I looked sick. I probably wasn't, getting everything I needed though. I definitely was, eating more of a fast food style vegan diet than not. You know what I mean?
Okay.
But then I was pescatarian for about 7 years, 6 years.
7.
6, 7 years.
Okay.
And I was still really thin, but it suited me well.
Okay.
I think I started eating meat again about 3.5 years ago.
Okay.
And I mean, right away I was like addicted to red meat.
Sure.
As soon as I went back to it, like more than anything else, all I wanted to eat was like steaks and burgers and things like that,
Sure.
And still to this day, it definitely is the predominant. Like I'd rather go have a ribeye and just a salad than anything. Probably it's like my favorite food. But I definitely gained weight once I got back on the meat too. But it was over COVID, and obviously there were some other factors to that as well.
Sure.
But it's interesting. I'm going to go back and do my own homework now to kind of see maybe what's going on, right?
Well, you might be a B.
Maybe. I'll ask my mom. She would know.
And, I mean, well, and it's funny because if you try to get your blood type covered by insurance, unless you're going in for a major surgery where you could have the risk of bleeding out,
they won't test it.
They won't test it. So
they'll test it, but you have to pay for it.
I bet, huh?
Right. And then normally it's a $40 test at Quest as an outpatient, but you're going to get charged, $400, towards your deductible. It's just the system is silly. And unfortunately, like most of the time, I mean, we always test for ferritin, zinc, and vitamin D3. Like that is, you have to test for those because some people may be eating all the right things, but they're not absorbing it correctly, especially if you've been on antibiotics recently. And, I mean, for myself, I ended up getting bit by a cat because my father passed away. He had a cat. I had to get the cat and bring it back, to where the shelter was originally. And My cat was not happy and got a hold of my hand and just went
Oh, man.
straight down to bone.
Oh.
And I had to go. I mean, I started to get cellulitis within 24 hours.
Oh,
So they put me on potent antibiotics
Yeah,
for
they say
14
cat
days.
is pretty bad, huh?
I had no idea.
Yeah, they have like a certain type of bacteria in their mouth that's like it's bad news. Yeah,
Yeah. Well, I found that out.
fuck man.
But so my gut ended up, I was, even though I'm doing all of the right things, I'm taking all the right stuff, I'm basically, I'm subscribing to everything that I talk about. The last time I tested my vitamin D, it was a 22. Well, I'm on 10,000 units of vitamin D per day, and I'm just not absorbing it. So you got to mix it up. And so you got to do what you got to do based on your situation.
Yeah, I think I'm at like 75, 80,
Nice. Well done.
but I take 50,000 Monday and Thursday.
Okay. Just don't get too high.
That's where I hold.
Wow, so 50,000, or basically, so you're 100,000 per week,
Correct.
and that keeps you at around 75.
Yeah.
Well, that's perfect. That's where you want to be.
I noticed when I went lower, it went way lower. So I was like,
Oh, I'm sure.
all right, 2 pills a week, we're good.
Right on.
I have no idea what's going on because I'm not as
Do you remember
Um,
the last time you even went to a doctor?
active in taking tests and things of that nature.
Sure.
I mean, probably something around the baby or whatever, taking the blood tests for like that type of shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But what's like for somebody that has no idea what's going on with themselves, what's their first step to like
So first step would be the self-assessment. So the really basic stuff would be, where are you losing hair on your head? Are you universally losing it throughout your entire scalp? So maybe it appears as though like your part is widening, but you don't have any expression in the temples. You don't have any expression in the crown, particularly. You're a male, but you go, man, I'm thinning out through the middle. So at that point, that's probably not genetic, because if you have any type of issues with nutrition and inflammation, it's going to amplify your genetics and make it worse. So you would be expressing some type of DHT issue. So you kind of look at where you're losing hair. You're losing in the back, sides, top. Top is DHT, sides is nutrition or inflammation. Nape of the neck is almost exclusively inflammation. So you can look at that. Age. So if you're a 17-year-old female, you're not on any medication and you're losing hair, there's no way that it's DHT. Like there's no way it's genetics. And if you were like, look, thanks, Will, for giving me those scenarios, that doesn't apply to me. Go get a blood test for vitamin D3, zinc, and ferritin. You want to split the range. So whatever the range is, and you could be in Canada and they'll be looking at your vitamin D in nanomoles, versus liters. Here it's nanograms per milliliter. You want to split the range. If it's at the low end of whatever the normal range is and someone told you it's normal, it's probably not normal for your hair. So look at that. If you are losing more hair at the top of the scalp than you are everywhere else, that is purely genetics. And you can just rubber stamp that. It is definitely an issue. If you have itching, burning on the scalp, any redness, if you have gut issues, so constipation, diarrhea, acid reflux, there's probably an inflammatory link. So that's just dealing with the undertone of why you're losing hair. And that's where you should start. You have to stop the reason for the loss. Then you can go into growth stimulants, minoxidil, low-level laser therapy, PRP, which basically encompasses stem cells, exosomes.
That shit hurts so bad.
Oh, so you've had PRP as well?
Yeah.
this guy's done everything.
Yeah.
Okay.
Everything but talk to you, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably where
I
we
found
should've
him
started, to be honest.
after I did everything.
Yep.
What is that? 2 trips to Turkey?
2 trips to Turkey.
Oh, you went to Turkey.
So I did one here.
Okay.
Fuck, did it suck here.
Okay. Like
It was painful. And the guy was like highly recommended. I'm like, I don't know, Turkey, it was like all nice and pretty. Didn't look like there was any blood. After I left the fucking office here, it looked like I left a crime scene. And like you could even see like they weren't fully pushed in, so there's like little balls sitting on top of my scalp. I'm like,
well, that's normal though. Like
but when I did in Turkey, everything was like flush. Inflammation was limited. I didn't have to tape my head. I had bandages obviously from donor, but
okay.
that was it. And
So your Turkey experience was good.
Oh, the numbing part sucks. There's no way of getting around that. But once
Okay.
they numb me, I slept through the whole
I mean,
procedure.
they just do a block.
Yeah, they did the whole block on the
Okay.
back.
Well, that's good.
They're like, oh, squeeze the squeezy ball. I'm like, what the heck's that gonna do? Is you're poking me with a 20 gauge needle in the back of my head. But once it was numb, I passed out.
Okay.
They had to wake me up 4 hours later. They're like, hey, time to eat lunch. It's already lunchtime? Okay. Ate lunch, went to the bathroom, and then they're like, all right, lay back down. We got a couple more hours, and went back to sleep.
Oh, wow. That's great.
Yeah.
So how many grafts did you get?
Between both trips, 6,000.
Okay. And then what about your first experience here?
Here, 3,000. So
Okay.
9,000.
9,000 grafts. And you're maxed out, I'm assuming. Yeah.
That's it. They said no more.
Right.
Does it start to take away from where they're pulling?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It does, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, and then I thought I noticed a little bit of a scar. Did you do strip at least for one of them, or was it all FUE?
All FUA.
Okay. So, yeah, so you have 100,000 hairs on your scalp, and that's what you start out with. Some have 150, some have 80. Redheads have less than everybody else. But realistically, if you then, sort of section off your scalp and it's the top of the scalp that you're concerned about, that's 33,000 hairs. So if you can move 9,000, well, that's great. It's way better than they used to be able to do.
Oh, yeah. Before it used to be like 1,200.
Yeah, and you do it in, 1,200, 2,000, you're going to get maybe 2 sessions, maybe 3 tops. So like 6,000 used to be kind of the max.
And a fat scar.
Right, huge scar. And if you're going to end up then having a scarring issue, so you're keloiding, then that's all, basically taking over the other hair follicles. But realistically, you are trying to cover with a third of what you once had, and it's just really not possible. So the best option is to stop your hair loss in its tracks with finasteride, blocking the underlying reason for the loss, natural topicals, minoxidil, whatever, and then using that 10,000 graft capacity and really focusing on the front or focusing on the back, focusing on wherever you need it and maxing out that area.
We mainly focused on the front.
Okay. Well, it frames your face nicely.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Because it used to be, it pulled a good way back.
Yeah.
So.
But that's where most people care about it, is the front.
Yeah, and then, if you're able to use your secret sauce to get back 15, 20%, not a bad day.
You can always go back in time, with the exception of scarring alopecias. You can go back in time usually 5 years within 18 months of treatment.
Wow.
It's not bad.
Yeah. So I'll say 18 to 24 months.
Starting early is obviously a key in this. If you can go back in time,
Absolutely.
5 years, you want to start as early as possible then.
I just had a gentleman who booked a phone consult with me. He's in the industry out here. I think he's 19 or 20, and he's like, man, I'm an actor. I can't lose my hair. Like I'm in a lot of roles. I think I'm shedding. I'm not sure. Well, sure enough, he was going after prevention, but I saw that he was losing his hair already. So there's no way you'd notice. You go, this guy's got monumental, beautiful hair. He was just starting to lose his hair. So he can stop it now. And I prescribed a protocol, mainly nutritional items. And then he won't have to deal with hair loss probably for another 5 to 7 years. And in 5 to 7 years, probably his genetics will kick in. The DHT will become more aggressive. The older you get, the more DHT becomes a problem. And then he can start on finasteride or, our DHT blocker or whatever. Whatever he's going to do to control that issue.
Is there a point of no return?
Yes. So, realistically, if you have had a dormant hair follicle, especially under the microscope, for more than, 2 years, that hair follicle is dead. So it's just not coming back. And if you are lucky enough to somehow have something else that was a contributing factor, like, again, nutrition or inflammation, that might not apply. But normally, again, if that hair follicle is not growing anything, your body's going to get rid of it. Why is it supplying nutrients to an organ you're not using?
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So I'm probably fucked.
Well, I see. There's some stuff up there.
Yeah.
So
there's some stuff there.
Yeah.
You can feel
But
it.
if there's still some stuff there, does that mean there's a possibility of being able to get some more back?
Yeah. If there's viable pigmented hairs under the microscope, then you'll typically be able to elongate those. So if you can double or triple the existing hair, then that's usually pretty great. I mean, that would be impossible 40 years ago.
Yeah.
But if you double or triple, say, a hair that's been miniaturized down to 10% of what it once was, then you might be able to get it to 30% of what it once was. If it was, 5% of what it once was, it's probably not worth it.
Gotcha.
My hair was thick when I was young. I had really nice, thick, curly hair.
We
Long.
know. Yeah. Yeah.
When was the last time you had a full head of hair? Like where you didn't shave it?
Probably like when I was like 25 or something, 26, yeah.
So it's been a minute.
Yeah, and my hair wasn't bad then. If I showed you a headshot from then, you would be like, this guy has nice hair.
Yeah.
But it was already thinning, and then I just started to shave it, and then that was just kind of that,
Well, luckily you have a well-shaped head.
Yeah, it fits me. It's fine. I'm like, he talks to me about it a lot, and I'm like, fucking, I'm over it. It's just part of the path. So,
Yeah.
luckily I look okay bald, and I'll just run with it, and it is what it is. But, I mean, obviously I have a son, and going forward, just to be able to help somebody else that, if you ask me if I would rather be bald or have hair, what do you think the answer would be?
Right, of course.
Rather have hair.
I would rather have my hair
Yeah.
back, right?
I mean,
If I could turn around tomorrow, I think for men or women in general, I mean, that's a big what's the word I'm looking for? I guess like a big loss of confidence, right?
oh, for sure.
I mean, I think you see that men focus on that the most. It's obviously like a big drop in confidence or the way that they're presenting themselves to the world.
Do you remember Andre Agassi's hair?
Yeah,
Okay. So, I mean, he was
when it
known
was long,
when it was long.
and then I remember when he was still losing it, but it was still long.
Right. Well, so he wore a hair system for a long period of time. And he came out with his book, I don't know, what, 12 years ago, 13 years ago, and was like, look, I was wearing a wig for much of my career because
He didn't want people to know. That
He
was
didn't-
his look.
exactly, that was his look. That's what he identified with. So there was one portion of the book we actually talked about that in an advertisement, and I said, because I used to do my own radio commercials, and I said Andre Agassi's book said that he basically rather lose an appendage than his hair because he so identified with the look of himself with hair that it was almost easier to lose a body part.
Wow.
And I mean, it is what it is. I mean, it's unfortunate, honestly, that we put that much pressure on ourselves, myself included. I mean, because otherwise I would be a bald architect and I would be totally cool with that. I mean, if it
But yeah,
but it's, for me, it changed my profession. Like my path completely changed because of my own situation. And I'm like, I'm not going to be 25 and bald. Like that was just not my mission. And so, that was, I luckily had the path to change. But if you don't, then it is what it is.
Yeah. It's always funny to see the guys with nothing on top and just some on the side. I'm like, just fucking commit at this point.
Yeah, I mean, but again, there was
sometimes that I seen a couple of Italian designers just recently who like they wear it really well.
absolutely.
Some do, but
Like
others-
amazingly well, where you're like, damn, that is like actually looks dope on this dude. And Giorgio Armani is like one of the guys that like that dude's been missing hair for 50 years probably, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And just wore the sides and everything else, like, and looks incredible. He's like he looks like the picture of success.
Sure.
So it is possible to rock that and be very masculine and attractive in certain senses as well.
Of course. Well, and if you've got good facial hair, which oftentimes men who are losing their hair, because the same receptors that are in your facial hair and in your arms, those are DHT receptors. So ironically, this has the opposite experience to those same hormones that this and your body hair does.
Yeah.
So you'll end up being more hairy because a lot of times people associate more hairy men with possibly being more likely to go bald, which is actually true in the sense
Right.
that you might have a higher level of testosterone, you might then have a higher level of DHT, which means you're going to express more body hair. Also, lose potentially more hair on the top of your head. So anyway, moral of that story is if you've got good facial hair, then rock that facial hair, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, if you're concerned about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it does, it'll grow, you know? And you see that a lot, actually, especially nowadays, that the bald with the big beard is a very in fashion trend for men.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a consult yesterday. This guy, he flew in from Florida to see me. He ended up having this just, I mean, he was a very masculine looking dude and, you know, very well shaped beard hair, you know, just typically more of a testosterone dominant individual. And he started losing his hair when he was early 20s. He had his first hair transplant when he was 23 or 24.
Wow.
Wore a hair system from 25 to like 37, and
Wow.
then took the hair system off. I don't know if he went to Turkey, but he had some massive hair transplant. So then he had approximately 9,000 grafts, but no one has tested his nutrient levels ever. And I'm looking at his head, I'm going, man, you got a lot of these small vellus hairs. There's got to be something going on here. And so I'm like, I was excited during, and I don't mean to be that way in a consult because, you know, I'm sensitive to the situation, but I'm like, man, I want to get your blood work back because if your D is through the floor, you're going to respond so well. It's going to be an amazing outcome. And so I hope I didn't, you know, I hope if he's watching this, he'll be like, you're talking about me on the, but I hope that he does have low nutritional levels because if we can get those nutritional levels up, it's going to be fuel for hair regrowth and it will be a monumental change. It's not going to bring back the male pattern that's been gone for 20 years, but all that donor hair that has been miniaturized, he might be able to get another transplant, fill in that spot in the back and really be happy with his outcome.
Awesome.
I'm sure you gave him a lot of hope because considering how much he's been through, it bothers him.
Oh, I mean, he flew in, you know, from
Across the country
to see me.
I mean, he's active. He's proactive. You can't say he's not. I mean, he wanted hair, obviously.
Absolutely.
He got a transplant at 20 in his early 20s and then wore a system. It's like, that's a commitment.
If you're wearing a system, you're committed.
Yeah, the system's the one where they glue it on.
Yeah.
Like they shave your head and then throw some glue and.
Yep. There used to be companies.
But
What's the upkeep
damage
on
there?
something like that?
Yes.
Yeah.
And the upkeep is typically the normal experience of a hair system is you go in, and this was, I think it's changed a little bit, but traditionally, especially in Phoenix, was where I had most exposure to hair systems. People would go in and they'd say, go to, I'll call it hair club because I knew specifically in Phoenix this was where this was happening. They'd go in and be like, I want to look like this guy. And they're, oh, okay, well, let's sit you in the chair. And, you know, they'd buzz the middle portion of their head and then they'd try on a hair system and they'd be like, how do you like it? And they're like, well, I thought, you know, something different was going to happen. But then they're kind of committed at this point because you just shave the middle of your head and you've got this hair system on, but they go, oh, wow, this looks really good. And then if you have this hair system, it's either live human hair, and which the more you wash it, because you're going to be washing it in the shower, shampooing it, there's no essential oils being derived from your own body to protect that hair. So that hair is going to break down.
Dry and rough and changes, huh?
Yeah, so like a sponge over time, it gets kind of dried out and brittle and whatnot. Same thing's going to happen with that hair. So what they do is they'll give you 4 different systems. Each system's around 1,500, maybe 2,000. And so you have 4 different systems that you're going to be rotating every usually 4 to 6 weeks. And they'll put a new system on and then they'll sort of let the other system rest. And then you get about, back then it was about 2 to 3 uses per hair system. And then you got to re-up and buy more systems. But you're going back for maintenance every, 4 weeks and getting it re-glued because obviously between the oil emitted from your scalp, the adhesive is going to come off at some point.
What does their scalp look like on their side?
So there's something called traction alopecia, which is where the more you pull on hair, the more it sort of damages the hair follicle if it keeps getting ripped out. So I saw a lot of traction alopecia. So if somebody had a lot of hair and they put on a hair system, every time that thing came off, you were just ripping more hair out.
Wow.
So you're actually doing more damage to that hair. But, it is what it is. And
essentially you're waxing your head every 4 weeks.
I mean, it's not that aggressive, but yeah, you could certainly compare it to that.
Seems like a lot of work and a
I'd
lot of
ra-
money.
Look, after
Absolutely.
doing
Yeah.
hair transplant,
I'm not only a client. I'm not only I'm
Hair
the
club
president.
president. Yep.
I'm a client.
Yes. Totally.
yeah.
I remember those growing up.
Luckily,
Now-
I look good with or without hair, so I'm good.
There you go. Well, and for the record, I don't. That was back then. I don't know what Hair Club does now.
I'm sure
so.
it's a
I'm not gluing. Shit goes that bad, dude. I'm shaving my head. Fuck it.
yeah.
Yeah.
I like the Michael Jordan phase, where he just kind of one day he had hair and the next year he just came back bald and started winning championships.
Oh yeah, and it's like for some people, who cares?
Yeah.
You know. And I mean, I had a guy. We regrew all of his hair like 06, 07. He got married, and he's back in my office 8 years later, bald again.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what happened? He's like, well, I got married. I let it go. I'm bald again. Can you grow it back? And I'm like, I don't think so. I'm like, I don't think I can grow it back again. Like, that's not how this works. And
I thought you just put some Miracle Grow. Call it
yeah, we'll just, I'll do a little hocus pocus on it. Ironically, we had just started doing PRP. And for whatever reason, he was so responsive, he ended up growing back most of it.
What is PRP?
PRP is platelet-rich plasma. And so you'll draw blood, stick it in a centrifuge. You're going to separate out the platelets from basically the remainder of your blood. And you're concentrating the platelets within, essentially this one small area of the vial. You typically want to have 5 times platelets that would normally be in your blood.
Gotcha.
So you get all these stem cells in these platelets, and when you inject them properly, proper injections into the area, then you'll end up basically getting the subcutaneous fat layer, and you're going to end up having all of these stem cells sort of proliferate through the subcutaneous fat, re-stimulating that fat, because there's this fat layer on your scalp. It's about 9 millimeters thick. You want that to be as thick as possible because, inside this sort of body of skin, you've got the epidermis, the dermal layer, which is where your hair follicles live, but some of the blood flow is coming from that subcutaneous fat. And the thicker that fat layer, typically the more hair you have. So when that fat layer shrinks down to 2 millimeters, which is typically what it is if you've been through male pattern loss, you need to get more nutrients and more fat to that area. In this case, the platelets are going to stimulate recovery of the scalp, stimulate recovery of the hair follicle, and you'll get thicker, fuller hair most of the time. If it's not done properly, or if you can't respond for a million different reasons, it's not going to do a whole lot. Handful of cases I've seen people lose hair because of the trauma. But,
I feel like I did after the first time I did it.
okay.